Okay, this is going to be the TinkerCad portion for week number 4. So we're going to be working with lab number 4 this week. But all we're going to do with lab 4 is wire the circuits themselves. We're not going to answer the questions yet. We're going to do that next week. The reason for that is because to answer the questions, that actually requires some content that we haven't done yet. It's going to use De Morgan's theorems to simplify Boolean expressions, which we will actually do in the lecture next week. So because we have the test this week, we're just going to do a review of material so far, then new content next week. We'll need that content to actually do this lab in complete form. But we are going to learn how to wire more complex circuits this week, and I'm going to show you some methods that will help you with that. Okay, so that's what this week is about. We're going to basically wire the 3 circuits for lab number 4, but we won't do anything else with them beyond that. We're just going to learn some good wiring practices. Okay, so let's go ahead here. So the lab for week 4 has 3 circuits to it. It's got part A, looks like this, part B looks like this, part C looks like this. So definitely more complexity than we've had so far. So once we start wiring more complex circuits in TinkerCAD or on our breadboards, we need to stay very, very organized because these will become very messy very quickly. And if you do something wrong, it becomes very difficult to figure out what that is that you did wrong. So we are going to talk today about some different methods we can use to try to keep this organized. Okay? Now, one of the things you're being asked to do in these labs is to organize your wiring. I'm going to move something here. Keep your wiring organized. Select my pen. In a way that we're going to be asked to lay out everything before we lay it out and plan it out before we actually wire it. So if you recall in lab 3, you had these charts which basically show you the internal diagrams for each of these different types of chips. I have done a little cut and paste to place these on our diagrams here. So we'll use these for our maps, and then on the diagrams themselves you'll notice these little things here, these pin numbers, where they're asking you to write the pin numbers in to plan these things out before you start. So this first one here for part A, this uses the 08 chip, which is the 2 input AND chip, so that is the 08, which is this diagram here, and the 32, which is the 2 input OR chip over here. So the first thing it's asking us to do is what are your pins for the VCC, which is your 5-volt power, and your ground pin. Now in pretty much all of our chips, these are common. That is pin 14 and pin number 7. You'll see it here as well, 14 and 7. But what they want you to do is write this in here. So we're going to say 14 and 7. So 14 and 7. And you'll have to answer these questions when you actually do the questions for the lab. We'll do that next week, but it's going to ask you what all these pin numbers are as well. So now what we need to do is lay out, fill in, what are these other pin numbers we actually need to connect to. So you'll see here we have 2 different AND gates that are being used. The first one, if we look here, we have 4 different AND gates to choose from before. From inside here, I'm going to start down here, so I'm just going to use inputs on 1 and 2, output on 3. So that is an AND gate configuration there. So I'm going to write this in. I'm going to say inputs on 1 and 2, output on 3. And this second one over here, inputs on 4 and 5, output on 6, input on 4 and 5, output on 6. So you can see now I have 8 of the 14 pins are being used on that chip. Okay, I'm just going to color these in here. Don't have to do this, but this is going to actually help me a little bit when I wire this up. So this is what this should look like when this is wired up as well. All these pins should be occupied. All these ones here should be empty. Let's do the same thing for the 32 chip, the OR chip. We have pins 1 and 2 as inputs, pin 3 as an output. So that's 1 and 2, and 3 as an output. So this is the basic form that you could do for laying out how you're going to wire this. Now the next step here, there's a couple ways you can do this. I'm going to show you the way that I like to do it, that I find the most helpful. I am actually going to plan out all of my wires and create a wiring chart before I do anything else. So let's look at what wires I actually need to put on here. I'm going to grab a highlighter. I'm going to grab a yellow highlighter here. So I'm going to start with this wire right here. So this goes from input A to pin 1 of the 08 chip. So I need to connect that wire on my chip. So I'm just going to make up a table that lists out every wire that I actually need to make, every wire connection I actually need to make. So I'm just going to do that over here. So I'm just going to make 2 columns, basically I'm going to call this from and to. So I'm going to go from A to, and I'm just going to make up some notation here. I'm just going to say 08-1 to represent chip 08 pin 1. So that represents this wire right here. I have that accounted for. Let's think of the next wire we need to do. It slows me down because I have to keep flipping back and forth between highlighter and pen. I'm going to do this in a different color. And I actually will follow these colors when I try to wire this as well, just to keep things organized. Let's do this one. Let's go from B to pin 2. So that goes from B to 08-2. Now I have another wire that basically goes from pin 2 down to pin 4 on the same chip. So let's put that on there as well. That's basically connecting these 2 points together. So we're going to call that 082 to 084. 08-2, 08-4. Now I'm going to use a third color. I have pretty much unlimited colors when I do the my wiring in TinkerCad. So let's use a blue. Let's go from C all the way over here to pin 5. Let's call that from C to 08-5. So that's 4 wires I have done so far. Let's do some in orange. So let's do this one here and this one here. So let's cover those 2. So this is 083 goes to 32.1, and 086 goes to 32.2. And the very last wire I have on here, I will do this in a red or a pink or something. This one here. And then we put this, I'll write it over here, but I'm going to say this goes from 32-3 over to the LED. Alright, so that is all together. Graphically, I can tell I have accounted for every wire that connects to a chip just by looking at this. And this gives me a total of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 wires altogether that I should put on my board. I've color coded everything. So this one is red. I have orange, orange. I've got this one is blue. Green and green. And that first one is going to be yellow. Okay, so this is laying out this wiring diagram, or laying out this circuit. So now let's look at how to take this and actually build this in TinkerCAD or actually on a breadboard. Okay, I'm going to pause for a second and continue from there.